Like baseball at Castle High. Should be their field.
He's showing the
Nice field. Very nice.
Okay, it should be good to go now.
Is that a CIF school?
Okay, perfect.
it is.
Perfect, great. Good, thank you.
Oh, yes.
Okay, great, we'll start your thing going.
But, wow, okay. That's awesome.
Really?
Bad name.
That was like my high school, Marshall High.
Do you have any water or anything?
Yeah. Marshall High, we always sucked in football, but we won the national debate.
Were you on it? Did you do the arts in high school?
Yeah, but I was mostly a jock. Played baseball and cross country. I did cartoons for the school underground paper. That's what I felt like I wanted to do cartoons. Because I was always in the drawing. I thought I'd do it for fun. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Rubén, we have to trigger to talk about the play without spoiling it for people who haven't seen it but are still going to go. We can't give away everything.
Yeah. Okay, well, just the crucial points are just teasers, right? You didn't give them teasers.
I'm good.
Yeah, like we could talk about the conflicts and stuff, but maybe not how they get
I'm good.
resolved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Evan, do you guys have any kind of a graphic for the play like this?
I have one showing right now.
Okay.
Just, like a widescreen version of it.
Okay, cool.
Hi, folks. Thanks for your patience as we get started today. And hello to everyone who's here online and also the folks that are here in person with us today. We're really excited for our program. My name is Joy. I'm the public program supervisor at the Japanese American National Museum. And I want to start off with a huge thank you to our partners at the Museum of Latin American Art and also CASA0101. We're really excited about this program today, exploring the idea of staging our histories. I'm going to start with a few logistical notes for the folks in person and online, and then we'll kick off the program. Just checking that there's no feedback. Cool. So for the folks that are here in person today, I just want to remind you to just please no eating or drinking here in the auditorium. Emergency exits are all illuminated around you. Please note those, and in case of emergency, please exit using the stairs and do not use the elevator. But the restrooms are available up on the second floor, accessible by stairs and elevator. And we hope that you come back another time to join us here in person and visit our galleries, which are open Tuesdays through Sundays here at the Japanese American National Museum. And then for the folks online, you can participate in the YouTube live stream chat. And if you have any questions for our panelists, you can put them in the chat as well, and we will be answering that. And thank you again to our partners at the Museum of Latin American Art for all your help with the live stream today. And with that, we're going to pass it over to Josefina Lopez, the artistic director of CASA0101 and the founder of the Boyle Heights Museum, who will be kicking off with a few remarks for all of our about the play that we're discussing today. And then she'll be followed by Kristen Hayashi, JANM's director of museum access and collections. Is that correct? close enough? Sorry. And one of our curators here at JANM. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Josefina, who's joining us virtually today. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I'm sorry I can't be there, but I have a rehearsal starting in less than an hour. And so I have to be here because it's a new musical that we're creating. And anyway, so Dan and Rubén, I love your friendship. Your friendship is such a celebration of our communities. And what a joy that your play's on stage, and it's such a beautiful play. I got to see it and it was so powerful, and I'm so happy. And I just want to tell you a little bit about how I started CASA. And I started CASA0101 Theater in Boyle Heights because I saw a documentary called Meet Me at Brooklyn and Soto, which was a celebration of Jewish American history in Boyle Heights. I was so moved by that documentary that I thought, wow, I always knew that Boyle Heights was special. I always knew that Boyle Heights wasn't just the drive-by gang capital of the US, that it was more than that it had such an incredible history, but nobody could tell me the history. And then I saw that the Japanese American National Gen, let me get that straight. And I saw that they were putting together an exhibit about Boyle Heights called Crossroads, I think, right? And Dr. George Sanchez was one of the curators. And I remember thinking, oh, that's so amazing that the Japanese American community is celebrating their history and their heritage in Boyle Heights. And I was so moved and inspired that I said, the story doesn't end, I know the history is amazing in Boyle Heights, how the Jewish community left, the Japanese American community was, sent to the, they were sent away. A lot of injustices happened. We all know that history. But the history of the Mexican American community continues, and the Chicano history continues. And I just felt that it was so important to celebrate my heritage and my history and to start collecting stories. So I set out to teach playwriting and screenwriting to our community, because for me, I was undocumented. I'm an immigrant, and I never saw positive portrayals of Latinas and Latinos. All the essential workers that we now recognize as people who really bring so much value to this country, to the US, to Los Angeles, all the angels of Los Angeles, that's what I call them. And I wanted to tell these stories because I wanted to see myself reflected. I wanted to celebrate my parents, their contribution to the economy here in California. So I started CASA0101 to collect all those stories. And it's been beautiful because for over 20 years, we've told over 200 stories, and especially dealing with the LGBTQ themes, women's stories, Chicano history. And so it's wonderful that Masao and the Bronze Nightingale is really a celebration of what we try to do. And I'm so happy that we can form a bridge between these two communities through this story, and also the African-American community. Because what's so beautiful about Boyle Heights, and this is why I'm so passionate about Boyle Heights, is because it really is the microcosm of the immigrant experience. But it's also Boyle Heights is the place where so many great ideas are born. So many amazing things happen with very little resources. People's creativity helps us. We all transcend so many limitations, so many injustices. And anyway, so thank you for having me. And, I'm going to listen in. And please come see the show, right? Because it's great to talk about, race and gender, this and that. And if you don't support the arts, if you don't put your money where your mouth is and go buy a theater ticket, movie ticket, if you don't support women, if you don't support our community, then we're just talking BS, right? So please come see the show before it closes, and you will love it. It is so beautiful, and it just transcends time and culture. It's just amazing. So thank you.
Okay, hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I'm Kristen Hayashi. I'm the Director of Collections Management and Access and a curator here at the Japanese American National Museum, and I'm also a historian. And I had the pleasure of seeing the play, Masao and the Bronze Nightingale, a couple weeks ago. So I'm very excited about this discussion we're going to have with the two co-playwrights of Masao and the Bronze Nightingale. So they're going to tell us a little bit more about the play, and I know it's going to encourage or inspire all of you to go see the play in the coming weeks. So let's see, I'm going to start off by giving just some brief bios of our two guests, and then Dan and Rubén will give an overview of the play. We'll have a little discussion, and all of you in the audience, both the live audience and virtual audience, are welcome to submit questions, and we'll make sure to get to your questions. So let me start off by telling you a little bit about our guests, starting with Rubén Funkahuatl Guevara, is a Chicano culture sculptor. It's not a great term. He's been working in music, theater, and literature for over 6 decades. His autobiography, Confessions of a Radical Chicano Doo-Wop Singer, was published in 2017 by the Awards for Best Autobiography in English and is required reading in Latino, Latina, Chicano, Chicana studies classes across the U.S. A KCET PBS Artbound documentary, Consafos, based on his life's work, premiered in 2021. Guevara will be in 2 upcoming group shows this year, Sonic Terrains and Latinx Art at the Vincent Price Art Museum and Latinx Art in America at the Smithsonian Latino Museum. And Dan Kwong began his career as a solo multimedia performance artist in 1989 at Highways Performance Space in Santa Monica. Hailed by critics as a master storyteller, another great line, he has toured his work to 44 states in the US and a number of countries around the world. He's a recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, Rockefeller Foundation, Asian Cultural Council, and many more. He also has earned major awards from the California Community Foundation, City of LA Cultural Affairs Department, the Japanese American Historical Society, and the Santa Monica Artist Fellowship. In 2004, his book, From Inner Worlds to Outer Space, The Multimedia Performances of Dan Kwong, was published by University of Michigan Press. In the last decade or so, Kwong's creative efforts have been channeled into playwriting, directing, and video production. Frequent themes include alliance building between communities of color, giving voice to marginalized communities, and the formative power of family. In 2021, he produced 2 documentaries, We Were All Here and Consafos. So now I'm going to invite Rubén and Dan to give sort of an overview of the play for those of you who haven't had a chance to see it yet.
Well, I think maybe a good place to start is the seed for the play was a short story that was written by Rubén in 2015. And Rubén, why don't you say a little bit about that short story? Because it all started from there.
Yeah, at the time, 2012, I was starting my autobiography, and I was having a hard time trying to write it, actually. I wanted the book to be like a series of vignettes, like little short stories themselves. So I decided to enter a short story writing contest to develop that technique. So I have a friend, Steve Nagano, who's with the Little Tokyo Historical Society. He told me they were having this contest, and he told me to enter. And at the same time, he told me that if I knew the history of Japanese American pachucos in the 40s, and I didn't know that. I did some research on that and found out that, yes, indeed, even in Boyle Heights, there were Japanese American pachucos that wore zoot suits and hung out with Mexican cats. So that was really a light went on. Like, God, how can I make a story out of this? Then I learned that the Finale Club downtown, well, Boyle Heights, when there was Bronzeville, hosted Charlie Parker, the architect of bebop music, and that Miles Davis played with him in '46 at the club. So all this information, the zoot suit, Japanese American zoot suiters and pachucos and Charlie Parker and bebop and Bronzeville, I said, like, wow, there's a story here. And I developed it. Also, I learned that in 1939, Count Basie played at the Paramount Ballroom in Boyle Heights. And that was a time when blacks could not play up above from Central Avenue. So that was a groundbreaking event and story, and that also was an inspiration for the short story. So all these different elements came into play, and I came up with it and decided to name the family after a family that I did know growing up, Japanese-American family out in the valley, in Sun Valley, the Emoto family. And the young kid, Stanley Emoto, was a Pachuco. This is in the mid-50s. We were in a car club called the Apollos. So the character Masao is kind of based on him. And then the family, the Mexican-American family, is based on my relatives. Valerio Casillas, who was a zoot suit tailor, actually, in the 40s and 50s. And my aunt, Marina Casillas. So there's a bit of it's a mixture of a lot of different ideas and people and historical events that went into it. I entered the contest. It was a finalist, and that was encouraging. And I took the story to Dan and to Emmanuel Deliange at the theater, and they liked it. They said, "Well, let's turn it into a play." So here we are. After what? That was back in, I don't know, 2018 or something, 2019. So we got some funding, and little by little we got sidetracked with COVID in 2020. It was going to go up in 2020, right? It didn't happen there, so here we are. And when Dan came on board, we worked on the first 2 acts, and then when the COVID hit, we were separated. So he really came up with a lot of added text, and Act 3 is totally all his. He really expanded the characters into a really full-blown story, for a stage play, and he made it happen. He really brought my little story alive into a big full-blown production. So it's pretty cool. So here we are.
Yeah, I could say a little bit about how Rubén and I have been working together over the last 15, 20 years or so. We first met in 1989 through Highways Performance Space in Santa Monica when I was just starting my career as a performance artist. And he and I were performing often on the same programs, and I would see him doing, I remember he did this piece where he was as if he, the guys who would sell oranges by the freeway off-ramps? There'd be guys there holding a big bag, and he came on stage with this big bag of oranges, saying, "Naranjas, naranjas." And so I could see that Rubén was someone who was very interested in telling stories of his people and of his community, and especially people who were sort of invisible or ignored. And so I noted that about him from when I first met him. We really started working together through Great Leap, Nobuko Miyamoto's organization, of which I've been part of forever. And I think the first time I remember really working with Rubén was here at JANM in 2003, when JANM did the Boyle Heights, The Power of Place exhibit. And so Great Leap was contracted to create a community-based performance that was to be done in the exhibition itself. And so Nobuko and I were working with Boyle Heights community members to do these workshops and collect their stories and turn it into theater. And Rubén was one of those people. And that's the first time I remember actually working with you, even though our paths were often crossing. And then we worked on another project with Great Leap called the Collaboratory, where Rubén was part of helping us brainstorm and figure out this artist mentorship program we did for many years. We started doing Fandango Obon in 2012, which was more cross-cultural community work, bringing together Japanese, Mexican, West African culture. And so, yeah, our paths would keep crossing, and then I directed his one-man show at CASA in 2016. And we keep on finding reasons to work together. When KCET decided they were going to create this documentary about him last year, I came on with his son as executive producer. And then, this play is sort of the culmination of that working relationship. And, we've found that we have all these common values about the importance of community. Rubén himself and in his life has been this border crosser. You know, he's had this almost lifelong connection with the JA community in Los Angeles. And so, you know, these are things that kind of have brought us together over the years. And when he came to me, it was 2018 when the idea of turning the short story into play, he and Emmanuel Deleage at CASA01 said, hey, would you like to come on as the director and co-writer? And I was very, very excited to do that. It was, I kind of knew it was going to be a bigger challenge than I'd ever undertaken in my life. I mean, I've done a lot of multimedia projects, but we started brainstorming at the end of 2018. And 2019, we started writing it. We had 4 public readings in that year. And each time the play got more and more involved and complex. And then COVID hit. And in a way, in retrospect, I think it was kind of a blessing, because from the time COVID hit and stopped everything, I wrote 2 more drafts of the play, and in my opinion, it got better. So in a way, I'm kind of grateful that we had that interruption, because it you know, really gave more time for the story to develop.
Thank you for sharing all that. It's really interesting to hear about your friendship and your professional relationship, and how that's kind of crisscrossed over the years and sort of led to this collaboration, this most recent collaboration. I know you have some slides you want to share. I wonder if you want to just give a brief synopsis or overview of the play, so that our viewers kind of have a sense of what it's about.
Do you want to try that?
Go ahead. It's too deep.
Okay. It's 1946. And JAs are beginning to return to LA. Los Angeles JA is beginning to return to LA, Little Tokyo. And only to discover that while they were gone, Little Tokyo became a major black community known as Bronzeville. And so the play is set during this period when JAs are returning, African Americans are leaving. It's this interesting period of flux. And in this setting, the Imoto family returns with Mr. and Mrs. Imoto and their rebellious early 20s son, Masao, who's become a bebop fanatic during the war. He's a saxophone player. And with a very disapproving father. The sort of the central conflict in the play is a father-son conflict. And their Mexican-American neighbors, the Casillas family, are there to welcome them back. The Casillas family took care of their house while they were in camp. This was an experience that many JAs had, where they had friends and neighbors who took care of their property while they were in camp. And that was the case with the Casillas family. So they returned to this, their world is in upheaval, and in the midst of this, Masao falls for a ambitious young African-American jazz singer who he meets in this jazz club, and which sets off a whole cascade of conflicts with family and friend, and you have this interracial relationship in 1946, which is pretty outrageous. And so you have all these characters, Masao and Charlene, who's the singer he falls for, Masao's best friend, Little Joe, the father, all the parents, where people in many ways are grappling with the impact of racism on their lives, whether it's in their relationship to themselves, or their relationships to their own people, or their relationships to other people. You know, there are tensions that we bring out in the play between black and Japanese and Japanese and black and Japanese and Japanese and black and black. And so all of this is really in this big stew pot of racism and how these people are trying to navigate their way through the obstacles in their relationships. And so a lot of it is about how relationships are damaged by racism and how people heal and recover from that, whether it's cross-cultural or intergenerational, within a family, between friends. And lately I've been thinking a lot of it is about the concept of forgiveness. How do we forgive each other, and how do we forgive ourselves for the ways that our wounds from something like racism have messed up our relationships. So,
yeah, one of the points that I want to bring up that Dan brought to the story that I think is very important. It was Masao's self-internalized racism, how he doesn't want to identify as Japanese. That's why he takes on the Pachuco persona and the zoot suit and all of that, and the bebop music, which is very rebellious at the time as well, a form of freedom music. So Masao had become in Dan's hands this real complex character, dealing with self-inflicted, internalized racism. And that's a very important part of the story that is shown and develops, and how Masao deals with that. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, I think you're doing a really good job of addressing the tensions, the racial tension, the intergenerational tensions throughout. But you also, throughout the play, there's a lot about cross-cultural solidarity too, and allyship. The Imotos and the Casillas are very close, and it does seem like they have more in common than not. Throughout. And, some might say that it's kind of this idealized relationship between this Mexican-American family and this Japanese-American family. Or some might say that this was fairly typical of a historically multicultural neighborhood of Boyle Heights. So can you talk more about the sense of allyship or cross-cultural solidarity, and why you also felt it was important to address that in the play?
well, yeah, I heard that from a couple people, that they felt these cross-cultural relationships were kind of idealized in our story. But for me, a lot of those come from examples from my life and from my family's life, that my family and relatives had those kind of relationships with their neighbors. And I think there are many, many examples of this, especially in Los Angeles, where, Holiday Bowl, right, was this mixing ground for cultures, where you had people who were comfortable hanging out with each other, were at ease with the differences between cultures, but were still, it did not get in the way. And there's an example where in the play, the Casillas family, the Mexican-American family, took care of the Imotos' home. And that story was repeated so many times. And I did this documentary about the multicultural history of my neighborhood in Santa Monica, where Rubén spent part of his childhood. It was called La Veinte, Olympic and 20th. And there were stories I collected from there of the exact same thing happening. Yeah, they were our neighbors. We took care of their house while they were gone in camp, So part of what was important about is that these are stories that are not necessarily heard, and that we are so discouraged about interracial relationships these days. We're so discouraged by racism that I think we really need to be reminded of, we have a lot of history of people doing the right thing. We have a lot of history of people caring for each other, helping each other, you know, and that I think we need to remember those stories too, because it's kind of like, you know, the lighthouse. It's like the compass pointing the way north, like, okay, this is how we can live. This is how we have lived with each other. And that these historical examples they're happening right now. You know, you don't tend to hear about them. You hear about the horror stories of all the awful, horrible stuff that people do to each other, because that's very newsworthy. But I think we've always had these examples of people not letting racism get in the way, refusing to let racism get in the way.
Yeah, Rubén, you also mentioned that. Are there some stories you wanted to touch upon?
No, I was just going to say that another reason why we were all living together with different cultural backgrounds was because of the housing covenants. This was a time in LA where people of color couldn't buy or own property outside of areas like Boyle Heights. So we were all together in one area, and when you're all in the same kind of, you know, in the same boat, you kind of work together. There's an important venue in Boyle Heights called the Paramount Ballroom that opened in the 1920s, and it was a hub for the neighborhood where people of all backgrounds would come and have social meetings, organizing against, you know, immigration situation, labor, police, and it also served as a concert venue where major artists performed there. Like I said earlier, Count Basie played there in '39. And so that's a prime example of an institution venue in LA that really welcomed the community of different backgrounds, and it worked. People partied together, they organized together, and you know, it became one big family. So these stories need to be told.
Okay, so since you brought up music, you know, music is such a rich element throughout the entire play. Jazz is a major character in the play. Can you describe the rich jazz scene in Los Angeles, especially during World War II, from Bronzeville all the way down to South Central Los Angeles?
Well, just a little bit. You know, in the 40s, well, in the 30s also, South Central Los Angeles was really the Harlem of Los Angeles in the jazz scene. South Central, you had clubs like the Club Alabama, the Dunbar Hotel, the 5-4 Ballroom, Cotton Club, Barrel House, all these famous houses. You know, Johnny Otis, a famous R&B pioneer in LA, he had a talent show at the Barrel House where he discovered Etta James, Jackie Wilson, major artists. So the hub was really down there. The jazz hub was in South Central, 30s into the 40s. But when the war broke out and Little Tokyo was available, the scene came up here. And all the clubs that were closed down in South Central at 2, they would come up here and jam with the musicians. The clubs would stay open up here till the morning. They called them breakfast clubs. And so famous people would come up, like Charles Mingus would come up and jam with Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. Oh, many different, you know, big famous people would come up here. And that also, that jazz scene was also happening in Boyle Heights a little bit earlier, like I said earlier, Count Basie and all those people. So jazz in LA was really a vibrant, fiery type of music that just, you know, what is jazz, man? Jazz is life, you know, struggle. It's like same as the blues, but it's like do it your way, you know, do it all the way and get away with it. And it just creates it creates a sense of liberation, I guess. Same as what rock and roll did later, right? But jazz was the jazz music, you know, swing, you could dance to it, boogie woogie, you could dance to it. But when bebop came in, it was more of a listening experience. And brought jazz to a whole different level. Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, those guys. But I guess essential, and that's what we stole. Well, we didn't steal. We borrowed from the idea of jazz being freedom, bebop being freedom, and that's what Masao kind of embodies, that attitude as a young jazz musician and coming back from camp. He wants this freedom, you know. It's like his liberation. And so, but yeah, no, jazz has an important history here in Los Angeles. Like I said earlier, I didn't know that Charlie Parker and Miles Davis played here, that Miles Davis's first gig was in Los Angeles. And it was. He hit the Finale Club. after I read his autobiography. So, yeah, what do you got to say about jazz, man?
Well, I would say in the play, music itself plays a key role in that within the play, within the story of the play, music is this vehicle that helps people to cross over in a certain way, whether it's to define themselves through music or to connect with another person through music. That one of the things that is in this play is the power of art, the power of creativity, the power of music to connect people, and to connect people in a very unique way. You know, music has this amazing power. Music can reach in and touch you in a way that words cannot, in a way that nothing else can. And we wanted to sort of use that as a way as another vehicle for people to get past obstacles. That music can do this. Music has this power, this very unique power. So it happens through singing. It happens through, instrumental playing. There are several key scenes in the play where music is a very key element to what happens in that scene, personally to somebody.
There's some questions from the audience about the music. The question is, how did you record the music for the Charlene Williams sounding like Billie Holiday?
Well, that's through Steve Alaniz, who's a close friend of Rubén and has played in Rubén's band in the past. Steve Alaniz was our music producer, so we picked the songs that we wanted Charlene to sing to, and which were all Billie Holiday songs, and we said, okay, Steve, we need to make basically a karaoke track, the equivalent of it, and so Rubén got Steve involved to organize the musicians. We went to a recording studio out in Rancho Cucamonga one day and recorded all the backing tracks for her. And then those tracks had to be adjusted and modified and remixed several times, and until we had the tracks, the recorded tracks that she would sing against.
That she sings live to.
Yes.
You got to say, yeah, she sings live to the tracks.
So you talked about jazz, but there's also music from other regions, right? So you include music from various regions of Mexico as well as Japan, and so I wonder if you want to talk about that and maybe some of the musicians who made artistic contributions to the play.
Let's see. Well, the Japanese father, immigrant father, plays shamisen. So we wanted him to play shamisen in the play. And so we got an Irish shamisen player, Mike Penny, amazing musician. And we said, Mike, can you give us a recording of Dankobushi and another piece? And he found it. And so that's how we got those two songs. And then there's one scene where Little Joe is playing Harana, and so we got Cesar Castro, who's a master son jarocho musician, and I said, Cesar, can you record something for me? He did it like in 10 minutes on his iPad. What else did we have for ethnic music? Oh, shakuhachi. There's another scene where Mas plays the shakuhachi, and so I found another musician recommended to me, Rachel Rudich, who is a professional shakuhachi musician, and I said, okay, here's the tune. It's this Japanese lullaby, and she sent me several versions of it. So it was really nice to be able to include these different, very cultural specific pieces of music, played by master musicians. and our actors just mime on stage, playing to the recorded track.
Yeah, Moss is playing, well, Steve Alanese did all the alto sax parts, and Moss is fingering those and pantomiming all that. That's all Steve's work.
It was really funny because there's this one scene where, I hope this doesn't spoil it if you haven't seen the show, where they're in this nightclub and Charlene is singing and Moss is playing sax, and he's supposed to play badly. You know, he's overplay. So we were recording it in the studio, and I kept saying to Steve, "No, Steve, you got to play worse. You got to play worse. No, that sounds too good. No, really make it obnoxious." And then in the mixing of it, it was like, no, you have to mix this so that saxophone just sounds horrible. And so all these musicians and engineers we were working with, we were going against all of their training, which was to make it sound good. And it's no, we deliberately want this to sound bad. We would have to keep telling them, no, make it worse. They finally got the idea. I was like, oh, okay. You want it obnoxious. Yeah.
Because the moment there is that he's trying to impress the girl, Charlene, with his playing, but he's overplaying. And also Charlie Parker is not there that night. He got busted, so they had to play longer. So he's overplaying. He's showing off. So we had to get the sax Steve to kind of show off and overplay in the recording. He didn't quite understand that at first.
Well, so the music is excellent, and so is the acting. So let's talk a little bit about the actors. Can you talk about casting and what you were looking for in the actors that auditioned? And were these actors aware of this history that you're telling?
No, almost none of them were. We had a few actors who had been with us all along the whole journey doing all the readings, like Roberta Martinez, Jose Garcia, Greg Watanabe did most of the readings with us, but all the other ones we had to start from scratch casting, and Eddie Padilla at CASA0101 managed the audition process, which is kind of done online, kind of typical. You send out the notice, people came in and would do the scenes for us, and we were going to have 10 actors for like 19 parts. Many of them play multiple characters. And so this was very telling of kind of, I guess you could say, the entertainment industry. So I would say for the African-American roles, we had maybe 14 or 15 actors submit. For Masao, the lead actor, we had maybe 8. For the white roles, we had 154 submissions. So, it was really kind of challenging. Like one of the hardest roles was like the lead actor, the lead character. What do we have to pick from? And same with his father. Those were the 2 hardest roles to cast. But we found amazing people in the end. We found amazing people. And this cast is really incredibly talented and incredibly committed. So casting was very difficult in a nutshell. After we had cast the play, we filled all the roles. And then I lost 4 actors in 5 days. Like one got booked in a feature film, one got booked for a TV pilot, one was offered the lead role in another play, one had schedule conflicts. So it was really, really hard to cast it. But what we wound up with, I'm incredibly happy with.
Yeah, I got to make one little addition here, that Greg Watanabe could only play until last Sunday. So this guy here, this maniac, is going to take over the part. You're crazy, dude. But I love you.
Greg Watanabe is one of the finest actors in town here, and he leaves large zodi to fill.
This is a question from the audience. Can you talk a little bit more about what happened during the stage readings of the play?
Well, we would send out a notice because we wanted feedback, right? So we would send out a notice to all our friends, hey, come check it out. And we would do these in the CASA Theater, and with like a half a day to prepare people. And I was already building a lot of the sound effects and music clips that I kind of knew I wanted to be in the play. So we would kind of do them. It was a table reading. Everybody's sitting in chairs at tables reading their parts. Nobody's doing anything. But I wanted to kind of to try and simulate this world and this atmosphere. I was already building sound effects and music clips, and those would be played during the reading to kind of bring you into this world. And then we would just get feedback from whoever was in the audience, and it was incredibly, incredibly valuable. People like Daryl Cooney told me, who came to like every single reading, gave really, really important feedback that was very helpful, although he wanted me to kill the mother in the end. He said, Mom has to die to make this story really Mom has to die. I said, I don't think so, Daryl. So I don't know if he was very disappointed that I didn't kill the mother, but we got really, really important feedback, not only from the audience, from the actors themselves, And so I take that and go back and attack it for the next draft, and that's kind of that was part of how it got shaped.
Yeah, I got to add also that the initial funding for the play was by the East Side Arts Initiative. And so they gave us funding to start developing the piece by having these community readings. That was part of the requirement of the grant. So we had 4 community play readings to get feedback from the community. We had both JA and Mexican American audiences all the time. It was pretty good. So that helped us a lot. But the East Side Arts Initiative definitely has to get a shout out for supporting and getting the ball rolling on the play.
Well, and then when it came time to produce the play, Janum, I told Ann Burroughs about it, and she called me up and says, hey, this is a perfect partnership for Janum. And Janum was our biggest single supporter for the production. So that was an incredible help for us to get the play done. We had a lot of experiences, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but as we were starting to go into production of, once people found out what the story was, they were ready to support us, all kinds of different ways. We got amazing support from people because they heard what the story was. Okay, here's my favorite example. There's a lot of video projection in the play, and I wanted to do rear projection, but we only had 10 feet. And I had a scrim that was 29 feet wide. How are you going to fill a 29-foot scrim with a 10-foot projector throw, for those of you who are technical? We had to rent this $15,000 lens. That's not what it cost to rent, that's what it cost to buy. But we had to rent this $15,000 lens. And so I was calling this company and saying, oh, we got to have this lens. Oh, the only one we have is in Las Vegas, and sorry, we can't let you have it unless you rent the projector too. That's another $7,000. And it was like, oh, shit, we got to have this lens. Nobody else had this lens. So I wrote to the woman, and I said, oh, by the way, here's what the play's about. It's about this, these families, and they're dealing with racism and this cross-cultural solidarity, I wrote this long email about the values and the principles and the issues about the play. And she says, I just sent your request to the general manager. Hold on. And the next day she says, okay, we'll do it. Because they heard what the story was. And so there were a lot of examples like that where people, when they found out what we were trying to say with this play, they got behind it, including Janum.
Yeah, and including the Nikkei Progressives and the Little Tokyo Historical Society, they all jumped in and donated money for the production. So big thank you and shout out to them.
Venice Japanese American Memorial Monument Committee, all these people and organizations really were excited about the story first and foremost. So I felt really blessed. by that.
Yeah, I think there's so much interest in this particular topic and this time period, and it's, you know, a lesser known aspect of history. So yeah, I'm not surprised that there was interest in the play. It's also interesting to hear you talk about what you had to do to try to achieve really the sense of place. You know, I understand that there's a lot of challenges when you're staging a play. You know, how do you evoke a certain time and place? And I think you did that in creative ways, which you started to mention. Do you want to talk about some other ways that you were able to bring in like mixed media or other creative ways to, again, set this time and place of Los Angeles in the early post-war?
Well, Rubén and I both agreed we didn't want a set. We did not want a traditional set, you know, and so...
We both come from performance art backgrounds, so we never have sets.
That's right.
You know, we just make up stuff.
Yeah, and I'd used this device of these wooden cubes before. I did this show right here in this space about my mother's life story, and I have 5 wooden cubes that I use and that get manipulated. And oh, okay, we're showing pictures. So I said, okay, well, let's do cubes. We'll use the cube device and to use these wooden cubes to just manipulate them and create a chair, a table, a bed, you know. And so with that in mind, it was like, okay, then this story, which is written in a very naturalistic way, it's like a family drama, you know. It's like people having conversations in their living rooms, in their kitchens and stuff. But the production design was going to be very stylized, empty stage, and just wooden cubes, and this big scrim. I knew I wanted large-scale projections, and I did another project before COVID. There, that's the fig tree right outside this building. An abstraction of the Morton Bay fig tree right outside the building. And so I love historical photographs. I love history. I just love history. And I've used a lot of multimedia in my work. So, okay, let's use the photographic imagery to create the place, to create the atmosphere. And so, you know, I was talking to Alan Miyatake and got some Toyo Miyatake photographs from the Bronzeville era, other things we found on the internet to just kind of create the first few minutes of the play. You know, it was just tons of images from Bronzeville to say, okay, we're going to just bring you into this world right away visually, and to set a sense of place. And Evan, do you have your newsreel queued up? Evan Kodani of Janum. So I said, oh, I want this fake newsreel at the beginning that sort of like establishes our time and place. And so I wrote this script and I said, Evan, can you make this for me? It's going to be this fake newsreel that's very sarcastic but sincere. And he made this amazing 90-second video. Can we show that, Evan? Yes, there it is.
With the defeat of Tojo's army and the surrender of Japan, tens of thousands of American Japs are being released from relocation centers across the U.S. They're wartime sanctuaries where they were housed and fed 3 square meals a day and allowed to live in peace and harmony for the duration of the war. Now that these inscrutable citizens no longer pose a threat to our national security, Uncle Sam shows he knows the right thing to do, and these grateful Japs are free to return home or resettle in new cities around the country. Here's hoping these sons of Nippon can make the best of their new opportunity, show the country they've learned a thing or two about the price of freedom, and fit in with real Americans everywhere. It's U.S. democracy at its finest.
Evan Kodani. Evan also made 2 other videos that are in the piece. I edited those, Evan, so they don't look the way you originally made them. But
So that's Evan narrating?
no, he got an actor.
Okay, because I was going to say, That was Evan.
That was you? Oh.
I shouldn't admit this because here I am, a historian, but I believed that was real. And then I saw an image from our collection. I said, what's going on?
You know, when we have a big JA audience, they're usually snickering during this newsroom because it's so sarcastic. But you know, that's how the play starts. And so immediately you know exactly the world that we're about to enter into. And so I'm so happy with what Evan created.
You know, also I got to say, Dan, I haven't been able to mention this to you, but I'm going to say it now, and it's cool. When you were coming up with all those cubes, moving those cubes around for all the scenes, I thought, oh man, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I didn't say anything to you, but I thought, I don't know what's going to work. But anyway, we got a review the other day, and the guy applauded the stage crew for moving the cubes so well. I mean, the stage crew got kudos, man. That's great. So it worked. No, it finally worked, and it's like a dance. I mean, you know, you have a scene, and then you have to move the cubes around, and the crew does it so smoothly and fluidly. You think it's a dance. It's very, very cool. Worked out, man.
I didn't know if it was going to work either.
Yeah. That's the fun of making theater. You never know. It's a crapshoot.
There were scenes in the play that I had written like 3 years ago, and they only existed on paper for 3 years, and we never got to actually try to make that scene happen until like a month ago. And so I was like, in my imagination, it's really cool, but is this going to even work? So there's so much uncertainty in the creative process. And we had a great lighting designer, Jose Lopez, who I've worked with for decades. And you know, just a wonderful creative team and of course, amazing actors to try and take this idea and like, you know, make it come alive and make it work. So that's the teamwork part of it.
Yeah, also another review just came in, a major one. Don Shirley talked about how the multimedia works, how it worked so well in the movie that he felt that it was like a theater film, music film. Remember that line?
Yeah, he said it was like a stage play, a movie presented as a stage play, which is actually pretty insightful. There's certain things about the stage play that are very kind of screenplay-like. You know, lots of very short scenes that go bang, bang, bang.
But he felt like it was a movie as well, as a theater piece, moving along with the images on screen and what was happening on stage. Very interesting observation.
It's a fast-paced play.
That covers a lot.
It's packed. It's packed with information and history and layers and layers of issues. These are some images from the play. Greg Watanabe in my overalls. Jose Garcia playing Mr. Casillas, and Michael Sasaki, who plays the lead character, Masao. And here you get a sense of the father-son conflict.
Yeah, and also another thing that I wanted to talk about, this kind of prompts that, issues around, you know, trauma from the incarceration and also, you know, mental health issues. We know that this isn't discussed nearly enough, and the majority of Japanese and Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II were very reluctant to talk about their experience until much later in life, and that had repercussions. You know, they really internalized the injustice and the tragedy and the anger and loss that they experienced. But I think you really poignantly get at this, and I wonder if you want to elaborate on that more. Just that, like, what were the repercussions of, you know, the silence and not really talking through the trauma that they experienced, and how does that play out, I guess?
Yeah, well, you know, Japanese culture traditionally is a very stoic culture, and you don't complain, you don't exhibit your pain. You know, everything is kind of kept inside for various, you know, reasons that come from thousands of years of culture. And so, well, this is interesting. In our family, my mother was an unusual Nisei who spoke very freely about camp. We were hearing stories about camp from when I was 6 years old. So my experience was sort of an anomaly, but I think for most Japanese family, this was something that everybody sort of kept inside. And yes, it took a toll on people in different ways. And in this particular family, it impacts everyone. It impacts everyone. The mother, who has become asthmatic as a result of the horrible dust storms in Manzanar. The father, whose business was completely destroyed. That's a very common story, right? And the son, for whom, you know, it was just okay, here's an interesting thing. For the younger generation, my aunt, Tome Nagano, is 101 years old. So she was 18 in Manzanar. And so for the younger generation in camp, it was a completely different experience from their parents' generation. You know, for some of the younger generations, it was like, hey, freedom. Freedom. You know, I can go hang out with my buddies, and I don't have to eat with mom and dad. And for some of the younger generations, quite different. For the older generation, you know, the family structure's destroyed. The male patriarch is completely disempowered and neutered, you know, and so it increased this generational schism within the JA community, and families were broken apart in ways they never recovered from in some cases. So you know, I think that sort of the psychological toll kind of played out in different ways in different families, you know, depending on your family. But one of them was this complete secrecy from the younger generation about what happened, and this separateness, this distance was exacerbated. Now in our play, it's Issei and Nisei. There's no Sansei born yet, you know. So it's just the issues between those two generations, and I think a lot of what the father is, a lot of the father's trauma, it stems from racism in general and camp in specific, you know, and he takes it out on his son. So this is how some of that, the internalized oppression gets played out within the community and within the family. And a lot of destructive things happen as a result.
Yeah, there are quite a few really heavy, you know, moments throughout the play, and so this kind of goes to an audience question. How did performing in this play impact the actors, and what surprised them?
Well, they're not here to answer that question, unfortunately. Michael Sasaki, who plays the lead role, who carries this play on his back, really. He's the prime mover. This is our wonderful team. Jose Lopez, our lighting designer, on the far left. Michael Sasaki plays the lead character, and he basically goes on a journey to hell and back in the course of this play. And he said so much of this story resonated with him and his own family story. You know, I think he's shown incredible courage and willingness, you know, and for actors, this is part of, you know, there's 1,000 different approaches to acting, but for a lot of actors, it's sort of like, well, how do I personally connect to what this story is, even if it's fictional? Is there anything in my experience that that resonates with what's happening here. For him, it was quite easy, you know. I mean, I think it'd be okay for me to say this, he had issues with his relationship with his father that in many ways paralleled what's happening in the story. And so what I said to him was that, you know, in a way, when you get to go through these intensely emotional scenes, you know, of the pain of a difficult relationship with your family and your friends, that I look at that as having the potential for healing, so that, you know, and in this play, this was kind of important for me, that especially to show men who get to really go deep inside of themselves emotionally and feel things and let things out. That this is so denied to men in general, males in general, right? And I find that an incredibly destructive part of the male experience, that you don't get to feel. So it was real important to me to have these scenes where these men get to feel very deeply, and they're honored and they're respected for it. And it's not looked at as weakness, you know. And so I try to communicate that to the actors, that, you know, in this scene, this is how I would like you to try and look at it when that character is going through that heavy, deep emotional experience, you know, that you're there to bear witness. You know, you're there to bear witness to, and there's a process happening there in that person. And so I think that kind of gave, I think it gave the actors a certain perspective from which to look at what's happening in the play, especially in these, there's, you know, just gut-wrenching emotional scenes in this play. And it was important to me that the actors went through that experience and that process in a way that was actually beneficial for them in the end. You know, there's a lot of ways that people approach acting, and it's important to me that if you're going to go to a very dark place as an actor, that you know how to come out of it, you know, and come back to the here and now. So that's kind of how I was trying to treat those aspects of the acting with the actors.
Ben, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that Michael has done an incredible job of coming into this character. He, you know, grew up in a white community basically, and I mean his own personality is not really, you know, I mean he's not nowhere close to being a pachuco. Yeah, so I mean he had to come into that psyche, you know, that mentality of a Mexican pachuco hipster zoot suiter, and it took him time, but he's there, you know, and I'm really impressed with that. I'm glad that happened. And yeah, no, the idea about going deep is so important. That's Dan's specialty. If you've seen his work, he does the same with his own personal theater work, performance work. It is a process of healing. It can be when you do that night after night, to go into that deep, dark place and come out of it, you know, enlightened and healed. And so in a sense, it's kind of a therapeutic process as well.
Yeah, Michael Sasaki is amazing. If you see him perform, he just does an amazing job.
He just got a great review, man. You saw the review, called it a star turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Another theme that I noticed was cross-cultural exchange. You know, Masao wears a zoot suit like his friend Lil Joe. Mrs. Casillas and Mrs. Imoto share home-cooked dishes with each other's families, and the two families, I think, are really aware of these like genres of music inherent to each other's culture. So can you talk a little bit more about cross-cultural exchange, maybe. And we know that this is, it's a two-part question. We know that it's not new, right? That this is something that is historical and something that continues today. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit more about Fandango, Obon, and Great Leap, and the projects that you're working on that sort of speak to this idea of cross-cultural exchange.
Well, one of the most fun parts of the cross-cultural exchange in the play is, like, we have this scene where the Mexican and the Japanese father in the backyard, and the Mexican father speaking Japanese, trying to, and the Japanese father is trying to speak Spanish, and there were a lot of places where Rubén and I, that was really fun to work together. I said, okay, Rubén, what would he say in Calo, in the Spanish slang? And he would come, okay. So we were really having fun making these characters walk in each other's shoes, or and where the characters are having fun, speaking each other's language, and it just kind of it's this this picture of kind of this joyousness of sharing your culture with someone else and having them share yours, and what a lovely thing that is when it can happen. So you mentioned Fandango Obon, which Rubén has been involved with from the beginning. This started when Nobuko Miyamoto and Quetzal Flores of the band Quetzal, who've been working together for a while, said, hey, there's some similarities between Fandango and Obon, that these are both they utilize the circle form for music and dance, and they're both participatory, and
they honor ancestors.
Yes, and they're about honoring ancestors, and they're about our maintaining and perpetuating cultural traditions. We should do something together. Nobuko and Quetzal tell the story better. So they came up with this idea of an event called Fandango Obon. And the idea was to have live Fandango music and Obon Odori together. So we did this in 2012 for the first time at the plaza over at the JACCC. And we had these amazing musicians. And we put together this afternoon where we would have a Fandango song, and Martha Gonzalez of Quetzal would she would teach the dance steps, and we'd had hundreds of people in this big circle, and everybody would be doing this Fandango, dancing to this Fandango song, and Martha would sing, and these amazing musicians on jarana would be playing, and then, okay, now we're going to do an Obon dance. Now we're going to teach you all how to do tankobushi, and Elaine Fukumoto would teach everybody the dance. And then the next year we decided, well, let's include West African music and dance. And so we brought in
Francis
Awe and his wife Omowale. And so it started to mushroom, and every year we would do this Fandango Obon event in the Noguchi Plaza, where the way Nobuko describes it, it's about democratizing the arts, where you don't come there to sit and watch, you come there to get out and do it. And we have, and then we brought in Johanna Blunt and Lebele Dembaya, West African drummers and dancers. They're amazing. And it's one of the most joyous events you will ever go to. And you have, 500 people dancing to Obon and Fandango and West African dance all afternoon long. And we just alternate one after another after another. And this sense of learning from each other, the sense that you are welcome. Everyone is welcome. And it doesn't matter whether you have any skill. It doesn't matter whether you are comfortable, And it's kind of become a bit of a tradition. It's been interrupted by COVID. We hope to do it again this year. But, and it's not only about culture, but it has an environmental component to it that has been introduced in the last 5 years or so, which is that, again, this is Nobuko's brainchild, that faced with the climate crisis, that we need to, communities of color have traditionally not been at the forefront of the environmental movement. It's been predominantly a white middle class phenomena, and we have been excluded, we have excluded ourselves from it, and we need to be part of this conversation about climate change. And so Fandango Obon has this whole element of what are the cultural traditions that we have about how to live wisely on this planet, mottainai, don't waste, etc. And so Fandango Obon has this kind of multi-layered message, if you will, of sharing culture, of honoring culture, preserving culture, caring about the earth, thinking about how to live sustainably on the planet. What are the things that our grandparents knew about how to live wisely that we need to remember and practice? So that's a way that this cross-cultural sharing you're talking about that has been going on for generations, we are trying to take it to the next generation.
Yeah, sorry, I took us a little afield from the play, but I saw that the work that you're doing now really had an influence on the play as well. Thank you for sharing that. So what is one takeaway that you hope audience members will leave the play with?
No,
Well,
you go ahead.
Okay, well, what we've been talking about is solidarity, to recognize that people of color can get along together, and show the world that we can do that. Boyle Heights is a prime example of, like I said earlier, of community coming together and working together and being strong through their, everyone's shared struggle. And it's a good lesson. I think it's a good lesson to learn from. And the play shows that, music is a form of freedom and possibility and bringing people together. And I just, like I've said many times that Boyle Heights, I was born there, I left there, I've come back, I've been there 40 years now. And I feel so proud to be part of a community that has a history that it has of a community getting along together. That's what it's about. How many cities across the country could maybe take a lesson from this, that have multicultural communities and respect them, get some respect for what we've done. So I hope they can leave the theater with a feeling of learning something, laughing. We have a lot of funny moments. And especially people of color that come to see our play, that they can walk out feeling really good, it's, wow. And those that aren't, well, hey, they want to be a part of it, They want to support somehow too. So it's a very positive, I think it's a very positive example of art, really getting to the heart of what it is to be human.
Yeah, I agree with Rubén that it's a real LA play, and that we have these treasures in LA like Boyle Heights, like Leimert Park. There are real treasures in this city. Crenshaw, yeah, and that we need to honor them, and see them for the treasures that they are, for what they have shown us historically, especially, and then I guess on a more intimate, personal level, what I hope people might get from this play is the idea that healing is possible and forgiveness is possible, and that it's possible to repair damaged relationships if there's a will there is a way, and I hope people get that from the play.
Tonight's event is called Staging Our Histories. So applying this to the stage play Masao and the Bronze Nightingale, why is it significant to stage our histories? Why is representation so important in the performing arts?
You're a better speaker than I am, man. Go ahead. Well, that's a hard question. Well, no. Can you repeat that part again? I was outside for a minute here.
Yeah, I mean, why is it important to tell our stories, to stage our histories, to see our stories represented on stage?
I think we've already covered that. I mean, basically, it's important to hear our stories because, well, depends on the story, right? Depends on the story. Stories from people of color, that's a big banner question. And I guess, we have to be seen and heard. We're just not. And we're not represented fairly enough in motion pictures. And the stories that do come out in the past have not been that positive. I think we're going through a renaissance in a way of new work. I hope this can start. Let me just rephrase that. I hope this can be a renaissance in creating works that come from communities of color, that can show the heart that we have, man. That we're Americans. We struggle, we bleed, we cry, we try, and take a look. There's wonderful stories. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about the stories that are coming out now. I've seen a few. That they're very emotional. They're very heartfelt, and they have substance. It's not flash and razzle dazzle. It's real stuff, and we need to see more realness. Real honest, vulnerable, strong people of color break down and come up and show their strength. And rather than just being yes sir or no sir type of people. And this work that Dan and I have created, I hope kind of it's an example of that. That's what I hope for.
Yeah, I've been working with Great Leap since 1990, and a lot of Great Leap's work is in the community and working with communities, telling community stories, because of this idea that when you see your story being told in some kind of a public presentation, that it has this experience of validation of your experience. And when your experience is not reflected in popular culture or mass media, there often is this sense of do I exist, And the big question is always, well, whose history gets told and who gets to tell it? And both of those are I think, are key pieces. There's the telling of it and then telling it from your perspective. And that this is a kind of a collective validation, and this happens in life and in art. I always think of this is lately like the whole reparations movement in 1979. As much as camp was this defining point in the JA experience and nothing was the same after that, the reparations movement similarly was a defining moment and nothing was the same after that. Why? Because people told their stories. And they told their stories in public, the older generation. That had never happened before. And it was like a tectonic plate shift. So when people get to tell their story and they get to tell it the way they lived it, that is so powerful, both on an individual level and on a collective level. It says, yeah, your experience was real. your experience matters, you know. And so I think that's so powerful and it's, and like Rubén says, it's happening more and more. You know, we have more and more, for lack of a better term, marginalized communities that are getting platforms to be seen and heard, you know. And for a lot of people, they're not crazy about that because it doesn't look like what we've always done historically. Whose story gets told, whose voice is up there, whose face is up there. And that's really is changing now, like Rubén says. And I see that as something that is only for the better, because it sort of creates this mosaic picture of who, well, okay, for the United States, who we are as a country. You know, we're all kinds of people with all kinds of experiences. And who's to say anyone's experience is more valid than anyone else's experience? So,
Yeah, and also we got to give credit to CASA0101 for being a place where these stories can be told and are being told.
Yeah, they are champions of that, and Josefina Lopez deserves great credit for creating that place.
And Emmanuel de Leange.
Thank you. Those are beautiful answers and a great way to end. Can you tell us, last question, tell us more about the rest of the dates for the play. So how can our viewers here catch a performance?
We have 2 more weekends left, Friday and Saturdays at 8 o'clock and Sundays at 3 o'clock. So this weekend and the next weekend, we close on May 15th. You can get tickets if you go to CASA0101.org, CASAORG.org/tickets. You can get tickets there. You can also buy them at the door. And every Sunday show, we have, after the matinee, we do this 1-hour talk back on different themes. Kristen, you did the first one. Last Sunday was Rubén and Robert Shoji talking about the music. This Sunday is going to be Nobuko Miyamoto, Martha Gonzalez, Johanna Blunt, and Martha Nakagawa talking about cross-cultural solidarity and alliances. And the last Sunday is, do you know the person's name?
I forgot.
We didn't curate this, so. But Sundays, you get this amazing talk-back session after the show, which is always enlightening. So 6 more shows.
Also, it's very hard to park in LA. We have a parking lot 1 block away, free parking, secured parking. So, yeah, 1 block behind the Boyle Heights City Hall. So you can park there and just walk 1 block to the theater. So that's always a major plus, to park free.
So thank you. This play, I think, really does elevate these lesser-known stories and amplifies, these really, it amplifies these stories that we want to tell. And I think all the organizations that are involved in co-sponsoring this event also do that really well. And so one of our partners tonight is the Museum of Latin American Art. So I'd like to bring up Allison Heaney, who's the Director of Learning and Public Programs at MOLA, to say a couple words.
Well, thank you. I don't know if there's anything else left to add except just to express incredible gratitude. When MOLA, the team at MOLA had heard about this project, we just literally were jumping up in the hallway going, this is what we need to see. So it's part of our Asian Pacific Islander Latinx Heritage Month, but I think we want to stress how it's not a month. These are the stories that need to be told all the time. So thank you to Dan and to Rubén, to the team at JANM, and of course CASA0101. It's just incredible. Go see this play. We can't wait to see you all there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I believe you can check out the rest of the month's programming on the MOLA website. Is that correct? Yes. And I know that this is also streaming on the MOLA YouTube channel, so please definitely check that out. Again, as they said, go get tickets. Don't miss it. There's 2 more weekends left. And
with Dan Kwong taking over Greg Watanabe's part.
Yes.
This crazy maniac right here.
Special shows. So please come join us. And we just want to say again, Jen, I'm so honored to be one of the sponsors of this show and to tell this story. So if I can get a huge round of applause for Kristen, Dan, and Rubén tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Janum.
Yes,
you.
and please stay tuned. We have lots of programming coming up for the rest of the month and the rest of the year. So visit our website, visit the exhibitions, and see the show. Thank you so much, and have a great night.